Okay, the book we're going to be reading from is Rival Caesars, a romance of ambition, love, and war, published 1903 by Thurland and Thurland, printers and publishers of Chicago. Being the Tale of a Vice President, a Major General, and Three Brilliant and Beautiful Women by Desmond Dilg, a pseudonym. Desmond Dilg was believed to actually have been Arthur Desmond, the pseudonymous author of the infamous to this very day book, Might is Right, the social Darwinist tract that has been blacklisted by Amazon and Lulu Print and Publish on Demand Company and different places like that. But this is a novel by Mr. Desmond. Begins with a quote, "The warp and the woof, they are woven by me, but the shadows and colouring rest mortal with thee. 'Tis thine to cast o'er them the glory or gloom, the sunlight of morning or hues of the tomb." Then there's a quote below that. "Two things greater than all things are, and the first is love, and the second is war." Prefatory material. Quotes. The matter of what is good and what is bad cannot be satisfactorily decided by one strict rule. What is one man's good is another man's poison. Good or bad, I propose to be something great. Unquote. Quote, there is no field of activity for great men without the coming of great wars, great struggles, and great revolutions. Unquote. What is more beautiful than to have one's name live forever linked with the heroes of all ages? Like misfortune, politics makes men acquainted with strange bedfellows. Truly it is no business for a gentleman. It would corrupt the principles of a saint. Good always results from a great war. The main point is not to be on the wrong side. War burns up the mental cobwebs that are liable to gather in a man's mind from overmuch contemplation of ordered tranquillity. War is the grim realist. It places a note of interrogation opposite every belief and every opinion, however hoary, however sanctified. Majorities are nothing except they have arms in their hands. Men of property must always stand ready to defend their possessions. If the soldier hasn't anything material to gain, he naturally enough loses his enthusiasm. Fame and glory are very nice, but so is gold and silver, and a new pair of breeches now and then. The vast majority of men, being futile and hopelessly weak, always delight in having the successful men among them taken down a peg. Politics would soil the soul of the prince of all evil himself. What is the world itself but an arena for love and conquest? Are we not here to increase and multiply and take possession? Whosoever, quote, believeth, unquote, otherwise hath surely not been endowed with the power to either think or observe. Love, the great creator of life, and war, the great selector. Women find little pleasure in the society of women. Why do men go to war? Is it not in some way to better their condition? All these newfangled notions that men fight for other things than their own personal advantage is pure delusion. As I understand human nature, to go to extremes is ever symptomatic of genius and greatness. Weakness is to compromise, to hesitate, to be half-hearted. Are not the great names of ancient and modern times the names of haughty and aggressive personalities who carried their loves and convictions to extremes? That is to say, to logical and clean-cut conclusions. Mediocrity is safe, no doubt it is, but it is very commonplace and of a drab color. Mediocrity is for men of the secondary, the bloodless type. If we want to shoot a man in war and he badly wants to shoot us, why should we not take his property, if we can, as well as his life? What is the good of being a soldier if risking your life and being a brave man in battle, if you cannot seize from your beaten enemy what your greater valor wins and what you stand badly in need of? Is not the sword of conquest the scythe of selection? Is not the leaping forks of fiery light the signal of the true? And is not the crash of cannon the actual voice of the gods? The delight which all women take in men of power and valor is elemental and undying. From the dawn of time it has ever been the instinctive wish of a good woman to mate herself with the boldest and most heroic man of her acquaintance, and in this there is a profound mystery and meaning. Its purpose is divine and godlike. That is to say, selective of the best and bravest. Oh, the reason there are no great poets and writers now is because there are no great deeds or heroes to write about. The world is becoming tame and sad and dreary. Next, we seem to have a drawing of some 18th century men holding swords, and a woman in a cabinet with a clock on top and two skulls on either side of the clock. This book is dedicated to the memory of the late Perry A. Hull of Chicago, a man of valiant and limitless ambition, cut down in the heyday of a brilliant and successful career. A man in whom the hereditary joy of struggle was instinctual, who daily delighted in returning blow for blow, one to whom the godlike pleasures of victory were as the breath of life. A, quote, man among men, who was at all times a terror to his enemies, and whose Homeric fidelity to friends and associates was as effective in answering as it was romantic and royal. The author. Introductory note. From original documents preserved from utter destruction in a very remarkable manner, this book has been written. The discovery of these documents, withered and tattered and mouldy with age and damp, is in itself a strange and tragic story. Some day it shall be related. Sufficient, however, for the present to say that these papers were found by an American scout among the secreted archives of a plundered monastery on the island of Cuba. For over 2 years the contents of 3 small boxes, clamped with iron and eaten by ants, containing private letters, deeds, personal memoranda, half-written memoirs, parchments, copies of secret political negotiations, suppressed pamphlets and treaties, old love letters, old newspaper cuttings and books, have been placed in the possession of the writer, that he may relate in regular sequence this true tale of love and jealousy, ambition, intrigue, and war, a tale quite as remarkable and romantic as anything to be found in the classic literatures of ancient or of feudal times. It is understood, however, that many of the facts and happenings bearing on the actual record of the 2 principal characters are intentionally veiled or wholly omitted. Notwithstanding the alleged tolerance of our times, the day has certainly not arrived when famous but unfortunate historical personages can be actually placed upon the stage, with all their manifold faults and failings, as well as their idealisms and successful deeds. The views and opinions of the great mass of living men and women are still bubbling over with illusion and conventional fallacy. They delight to steep their souls in parroted fables and accept the fashionable historians as unimpeachable messengers from heaven. The fact that, quote, history is a series of lies agreed upon, which was Napoleon Bonaparte's mature opinion, never seems to even dawn upon them. Thus romances have ever been written and shall continue to be written to relate the true things that nobody believes. Therefore, the readers of this book are expected to think between the lines. Nay, they are commanded so to do. Let them also remember that if the whole truth relating to any great man could be published, the tale would be scouted as incredible, abnormal, fabulous. For even as the light of the sun exceedeth that of the moon, so doth the wonders of solid fact exceed by far those of mere invention. Another quote. The lion in man, the tiger in man, verily they are in him for evermore. A monster would he be if made otherwise. The table of contents shows we have 20 chapters. 20 chapters, 20 videos. Chapter 1, then, the Blood Compact. And trust me on my troth, if thou keep faith with me, my dearest friend, as my own heart, right welcome thou shalt be. 'Twas the early morning of a beautiful summer day. Two handsome young men, dressed in the height of fashion, and conversing earnestly, walked rapidly into the old town along Broadway. They were returning from a duel. As if well accustomed to the locality, they turned sharply round a corner and entered Wall Street. Rapiers hung by their sides with glittering hilts and shining scabbards. Their hair, profusely powdered and combed back over prominent brows, hung down behind in the shape of queues over well-fitting silver-buttoned velvet coats. They wore stylish ruffles, slashed scarlet vests, knee breeches, garters, silken hose, and broad silver buckles flashed in the sunlight upon their low red-heeled shoes. Judging by their dress, general appearance, and distinctly aristocratic deportment, they were men of good family and superior standing. There was an indefinite something about them, that undefinable something which denotes men intended by birth and nature for the exercise of power and high command. Both were of medium height and seemed, quote, for dignity composed and high exploit, unquote. One bore his arm with care as if it had been hurt. He had dark gray eyes, a frank, generous, cheerful countenance, aquiline nose, a powerful chin, high forehead, light-colored hair, and a mouth at once indicative of great eloquence and business capacity. A curious sphinx-like repose rested upon his features, a repose that seemed, as it were, to penetrate without effort into the very heart of things. His general manner betokened pride and self-confidence with a strong dash of caution. The other man was more compactly built and remarkably handsome. His limbs were in perfect proportion. He walked with a gait of conscious pride, and his cameo-like beauty of feature was very striking. His hands were of extreme delicacy, yet with long, powerful fingers. He had a noticeably large head with projecting brows, a swarthy, sun-tanned complexion, small shell-like ears, dark curly hair, eagle nose, and blank orb-like oriental eyes, eyes that seemed, when he talked, to emit sparks. His look was that of an eagle in its flight, dauntless, graceful, calculating, and remorseless. Decidedly an extraordinary, a very extraordinary individual. As these two young men turned the corner, a richly caparisoned family chaise, drawn by two beautiful small white stallions and driven by a coal-black slave, trotted jauntily by. In it sat two fashionably attired young ladies, accompanied by a jovial old gentleman. All smiled graciously upon the two pedestrians, who lifted their hats and bowed profoundly in return, with true Chesterfieldian grace of manner, while the old gentleman waved his hand in a courtly, old-fashioned style, full of friendliness, as the carriage swept by. "Oh, Catherine," whispered the darkest of the two ladies, a lovely damoiselle of about 18, "who is that divinely dark young man with Alec? He looks just like the magic prince in the last storybook that Cousin Clinton sent over from London. I've never seen him before. And doesn't he walk elegantly? Who is he?" "Oh, he is a Puritan collegian from Princeton on a visit," answered Catherine. "They say he is a grandson of the great Jonathan Edwards, whom we hear so much about on Sundays. His mother was a celebrated Puritan beauty. I forget his name, but I met him at the Livingstons. I tell you what we'll do. We'll ask Alec to bring him over next Thursday to Judge Livingston's at Elizabethtown. There is to be a great birthday party, and everybody is invited." At this the first fair speaker clapped her hands delightedly, saying, "I am so pleased. I like him already. He is just charming. I do believe I'll fall in love with him." At this impetuous outburst, Catherine admonished her, saying, "You ought to be more reserved, Betsy. It is not proper for a young girl to express such open admiration for a man, more especially one she has never seen before." "You jealous old dear, I believe you're in love with this Sir Puritan yourself." At this outburst, Catherine blushed crimson, while the old gentleman laughed outright. In the year 1775, New York was a beautiful little half-Dutch town of 20,000 inhabitants. It was ruled over and almost entirely owned by less than half a dozen colonial families, which included the Livingstons, the Clintons, the Morrises, and the Delanceys. The cobblestone streets were crooked and narrow. Here and there grew wide-spreading shade trees, upon the lower branches of which the small boy swung by his hands, exactly as his ancestor did, the primordial monkey in the primordial forest. The houses were prim and whitewashed, with plain oak doors and brass knockers. Along the streets were rows of empty lots, littered with rubbish, also wide unfenced common lands, green with grass and park-like with trees, upon which cows, horses, sheep, and goats grazed placidly, with jangling bells lashed securely around their necks by thongs of plaited green hide. There were a row of gloomy old cannon where the battery now stands, wooden wharves built on piles rafted down from Colonel Schuyler's estate jutted into the harbor. Fastened to these wharves by heavy twisted hawsers were numbers of heavy old-fashioned square-rigged trading craft with high poops and blue figureheads. Also moored nearby were tall transatlantic clippers, smellful emigrant ships, fore and aft smuggling schooners, coasting brigs, revenue cutters, long, low, heavily armed privateers from the Spanish Main, greasy, wide-ribbed, bulging whalers from Baffin's Bay, heavy warships from Plymouth Hoe, and quick-sailing slavers from the Congo coast. After passing the Livingston carriage, the two young men turned up a narrow court above the entrance of which hung a creaking lamp. Climbing a flight of stone steps, the front man knocked at the heavy door in a peculiar way. The janitor, in semi-military uniform, evidently an old soldier, opened it to them. Brushing past him, they walked rapidly up a flight of oaken stairs and entered a large room overlooking the harbor.
At one end of this room was a wide, old-fashioned fireplace. The tables, chairs, shelves, and hooks on the walls were crowded and littered with papers, books, hats, canes, guns, swords, overcoats, and the general bric-a-brac of an 18th-century bachelor's apartment. Upon the walls hung pictures of famous battles, famous generals, and famous local beauties. On the mantel stood a bronze statuette of Cromwell at Naseby, leaning his Ironsides against his king, and another of Caesar crossing the Rubicon to make war upon his government. Between the legs of Caesar's horse lay two books, one the Holy Bible and the other The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. Upon one end of a large table in the center of the room lay a great heap of law books, and on the other end a substantial breakfast for two stood ready and inviting. On entering, each man helped himself to a goblet full of French wine from a sideboard, and then proceeded to where a basin of water stood in a small alcove. The taller of the two removed his coat, rolled up the sleeves of his shirt, and began to carefully wash the dry blood from his swollen arm. His friend assisted him to unwrap the hardened bandage tied tightly about the elbow. When the bandage had been well saturated with water, it was gradually unwound, exposing a deep, ugly gash from which the blood slowly oozed. After washing the wound, they rubbed it over with some salve and neatly bound it up again with the new linen bandage. "I regret," spoke the wounded man, "that this affair was not fought with pistols. The bullet is the thing. I challenged him, and of course he had the choice of weapons. This placed me at a great disadvantage, as you saw. I am not like you, a first-class swordsman. My forte is not the rapier, but the pistol. With it I am well practiced, taking quick aim and firing first. These naval officers are seldom good pistol shots. He had the advantage over me in this affair, but I have the satisfaction at least of having left my brand on him." "Of course," answered the other. "I quite agree with you. I prefer the bullet myself to the sword. It is not that, however, I am concerned about, but this. This duel must be kept secret as far as possible. It will not do to have it talked about too much. The public situation is becoming explosive. Serious trouble is brewing between the people and the king. And should either of us get the reputation of being noticeably antagonistic to the king's officers, the fact would do as much present injury. As your second, therefore, I advise hushing the matter up. What do you think?" "I agree with you," answered the wounded man. "We should not be too precipitate in openly taking sides until we see how things are going to shape. My sympathies are all, as you know, with the colonists, but I have no particular desire to become a mere solitary martyr. I do not wish to run my neck into a halter without some prospect of adequate backing." Both men then seated themselves at the table and proceeded to eat heartily. "Now," said the unwounded man, "let us forget the duel for an hour or so while we talk confidentially. I have been waiting long for a convenient opportunity to discuss important business with you. There is no better time than the present. Afterwards, as I go down to the ferry, I can call at the old doctor's and send him up to dress your wounded arm." The wounded man looked at the speaker inquiringly. The latter continued talking while his face lit up with enthusiasm. "A grander duel than that between individuals is imminent, a civil war, a revolution. This you yourself must already have observed. Revolution must come. It is inevitable. No negotiations can stop it. The cry for independence is ever growing stronger, and both sides have gone too far to now back down. The rapacity of the king and his hidebound ministry is preparing a situation brimful of battle and also of vast possibilities for young men like you and I. How pleasing it is to feel that we may be living in an age of great and heroic doings. I believe that fame, honor, and wealth are soon to be won, and won easily by men who are prepared to stake their lives, who are ready to risk their necks to advance their fortunes. The tide of popular passion is every hour swelling higher, and we, I say you and I, must float ourselves into power and position upon its topmost crest. Shall it be said of us in after years that we studied the history of the rise and fall of empires, republics, revolutions, and Caesars for naught? Shall men say of us we missed our opportunity? What you say, answered the wounded man, is almost exactly what I myself have been thinking for a long time. Revolt is in the air. The farmers are becoming desperate, the merchants sullen, the mechanics riotous, and many of the wealthy old colonial families are ready to join in and back the movement with money. I know for a fact that the Schweilers, Livingstons, and Clintons are ready to follow Hancock's and the Adamses' example. There is also every possibility and every probability of European intervention on our behalf. France is burning to revenge the loss of Canada and her western posts. She can effectually aid us because of her fleet. Holland and Spain are also likely to lend assistance indirectly. I agree with you that in the impending conflict fame, power, and wealth may be rapidly won by new men possessed of masterful brains and stout hearts. The popular agitators, mostly mere writers and talkers, who have led the discontented multitude successfully up to the present time, are men of somewhat inferior standing, though some few of them possess remarkable energy and even genius. Talkers and writers are very seldom deed-doers, nevertheless they have their part to play. They cannot be entirely dispensed with, not as yet anyhow. They are now at a crisis in their agitation. They have stirred up the great deep, but are wholly incapable of directing popular energy into practical channels. These men have scarcely given a thought to the darker and deeper problems of statecraft, nor the results that spring automatically, as it were, from triumphant insurrection. Now, if the rebellion is left in their hands alone, it must degenerate into a mere war of words, and thus become discredited. These fluent agitators, as I said before, are not fighting men, though the instinct towards strife is strong upon them. Let it therefore be our business to turn them into warriors, they and their followers. Let us transform their arguments into drawn swords and concrete deeds. This is our chance, I say. The people want reinforcements from the propertied and educated classes, and you want fame, position, wealth. They require men of a higher type to assist in winning over the landed interests of the South and the great mercantile and trading interests of the seaports. You and I have given special study to statesmanship, to law, to finance, and to war. We know how to speak and write. The study of the great classics has cleansed our minds of all the sickly fog and discouraging drivel of modern Gallic philosophy. We have learnt that power and government are still to be controlled as of yore by this. Here the speaker tapped the hilt of his sword significantly and continued. But neither of us are wealthy, and if we are ever to do anything of value to ourselves or to others, we must get money to operate with. Money is perhaps the mightiest of all weapons in the hands of daring and fearless men. It is, I believe, more regal than kings and parliaments. Now, how do you propose that we shall surmount this difficulty, the matter of preliminary finance? Want of money is what bothers me. I could shake the world if I had money. Ah, my friend, interjected the wounded man, the want of money is the root of all evil. Whereupon the other smiled and continued. But what is evil? That is the question. Money may be used both for evil and for good, and then a man must secure his own position before he can benefit others. Of course, I know that both of us have a talent for war, that as all things are possible in war, so all things are possible to you and me. Success in war generally solves the money problem for the winner. If successful in war, it is feasible for us to gain not only wealth but power and fame, including the love and admiration of women, and the gratitude of our delighted countrymen for ages yet to come. Indeed, if war breaks out, it will do so in the very nick of time for you and me. Yes, said the unwounded man, the bringing about of a new shuffle may end an ill game. Anyhow, war is the only occupation fit for a gentleman. To which his wounded friend replied, I agree with you. Scorn the grovelling ambitions of clerks and suburban beings. What is more beautiful than to have one's name live forever linked with the heroes of all the ages? I don't care much, answered the unwounded young man, toying maliciously with a bundle of his friend's tailor's bills. IOUs and billets-doux for the hurrahs of the herd after I am dead. Posthumous fame has no attractions for me, none whatever. What care I for the opinions of posterity? But I do care for success in my own lifetime. After my bones are rotten, what does it matter whether millions of semi-brainless beings curse or bless my memory? It is equally one to me whether they hang my bones in chains like they did the bones of Cromwell, or build a pyramid of stone over my mouldering coffin. Today only do I regard, today I know, today is mine, today I wish to be something, tomorrow is a supposition, a problem which I am not particularly interested in solving. Let tomorrow fight for its own battles. Yet you are very ambitious, answered the wounded man. I never met a man more so. Yours is the Caesarian temperament. The spirit of ambition within you knows no bounds. And why should it know bounds? Replied his friend. Listen to your own untrammeled soul and answer. Why should a man deliberately encircle his mind with needless prison walls? No man can reach highest excellence who puts limits to his own thought. Let us be bold in thought, my friend, if we are to be bold indeed. Verily, you and I are birds of a feather, replied he of the bandaged arm with an expression of delight. Well said, eagles are we, answered he of the flashing black eyes enthusiastically. The freest birds under the sun, and the boldest. The limits of their soaring is as the strength of their pinions. But the eagles battle with one another in their limitless and lofty flight, said the wounded man in a tone of prophetic interrogation. That is so. That is so, was the ready reply, and why should they not? What are their talons for? Is not the world a world of beak and claw? When we have winged our way to the highest empyrean, however, I hope we shall not draw off and swoop at each other, said the wounded man with an expansive and very expressive smile. I hope so too. That is the very point, was the reply. Let us twain mount and soar together. There is quarry and to spare for both. Let us agree in advance not to turn our beaks and claws against each other in the hour of success. It is well for us to talk like this, said he of the bandaged arm. We thus learn to know one another's real thoughts. It is good to be frank sometimes. I agree with you, answered his friend. It is good to have someone to whom we can unveil our real thoughts now and then. It is not well for Adam to be alone mentally any more than sexually. Somehow I have been unaccountably attracted towards you. I have a strange premonition that your destiny and mine are in some inscrutable way woven together. Indeed, I am sure of it. You are a fatalist, said he of the light-coloured hair in an inquiring tone. In some sense I am, but I do not so class myself. I believe one's fate is not wholly in one's own hands, however. There are great unknown laws of being that urge and drive a man on without him having the slightest power to prevent the climax, whatever it happens to be. Believe me, there is a truth hidden in the idea of destiny. But to return to our subject, you know that my friend Matthias Ogden is a splendid young fellow, but he does not understand me. I cannot tell him half of what I know or feel. On the other hand, I see that your brain is actually seething with the selfsame thought that is in mine. Therefore, I have been attracted to you ever since that day of the riot in the fields. I read all about it and of your wild Horatian harangue to the mob. Since then I have been irresistibly drawn nearer you. I have said to myself, that's the man to do it. He understands. Indeed, I travelled down here specially to make your acquaintance and get in touch with the other leaders of revolt. For 2 months now I have studied you and your published pamphlets, and I know you have been regarding me with critical self-questioning. We have drank together, fought together, and aided each other with friendliness in many an intrigue. My practical proposal now is therefore that we carry our friendship further and cement it into permanency by an oath of brotherhood according to the old custom. Let us formally determine to assist one another all through life, and especially through the days of turmoil and war that are assuredly nigh. Let us be sworn brothers as against all others, as it were two against millions. Let us turn passing events to our own advantage. Out of conditions as they exist, let us carve our fortunes and realize our ambitions. In the beginning nature made man a contending animal. Are we not all Greeks or Trojans? We must therefore make up our minds for a life of continual battle. We must fight, I say, morning, noon, and night, if need be, against an entire world. And I think that we will stop there. In the facsimile edition, this chapter is long and will require a part 2.